In this video, we'll learn what calculus is all about. So calculus is the mathematical study of continuous change, or otherwise known as rate of change. In any graph, have y plus x. So let's say we had a linear graph, looks like this. It could be y equals x. Now, the gradient of this line is the rate of change. So m is the rate of change. And just a quick recap, the gradient represents how y changes when x is changed by 1. So let's say, for example, our gradient was 2. So our graph would be y equals 2x. So we're saying that if x increases by 1, then y increases by 2, because there's 2 multiplied 2x. There are two types of graphs that we use a lot in calculus, and that is distance versus time graphs and height versus time graphs. So let's draw a distance time graph. The independent variable always goes in the x-axis, that's time, and distance goes in the y-axis. So that's like 100. Your graph may go something like this. But distance time graphs will always be increasing. Now, displacement time graphs they can increase, then decrease, and increase again. Because the difference between distance and displacement is that displacement has direction. Now, so for example, let's say we traveled 100 meters north, 100 meters east, 50 meters west, and 100 meters south, and then 100 meters west. So we started here and we ended here. So the distance that we traveled is 100 times 4, because we traveled 400 meters in total. But the displacement is 0, because we ended up at the same place we started. So for displacement, we don't care about the journey, we just care about where we ended up after our journey. Now, distance, you need to add up all the distances that you traveled in the journey, and that's just basically the difference between distance and displacement. We also use a lot of height versus time graphs. So let's say we had height and time. It might go up like this, and it's showing that the height of something, whatever you're measuring, increases at a constant rate at like something minutes, like 5 minutes, or between 5 and 10 minutes, and so on. Okay. Now, so for example, a question might say water is being poured into these vessels. Draw a height versus time graph for each of them. So let's say we had a vessel that looks like this. So up to here, this point, water is going to be filled at a constant rate. It goes like this. Now, since we're looking at height and not volume, the height of the water will increase quicker up here, because the neck of the vessel is obviously narrower than the body. So the height of the water will increase with a greater gradient. Okay. Let's say we had a vessel that looks like this. Water will fill up faster here and here. So it might go like that, up, that, and up. That might be one of the graphs that you'll have to draw. And just one more thing about the gradient. So the gradient in a distance time graph, and so that's distance, it's time. The gradient of this line is the speed. Okay, so gradient is the change in y over the change in x, or y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Let's get these 2 points. That's like that P, Q. So if we find the gradient of a distance time graph, you'll actually be finding the speed. And that's because our y is distance and x is time, and speed is distance over time. Now you should know that from these triangles, d, s, t. So if you're trying to find distance, you do s times t. If you're trying to find t, you do d divided by s. If you're trying to find s, you do d divided by t. So let's do an example. Let's say I drove from point P to Q at 60 k's at 90 k's per hour. Draw this on a distance time graph and find its speed. Okay, so let's draw the distance time graph. The x-axis will be time, the y will be distance, so that's 60 distance. Okay, so it's saying we traveled 60 kilometers at 90 kilometers an hour. So to find time, we do distance divided by speed. So that's 60 divided by 90, which is 2 and 3. So it takes 40 minutes to travel 60 kilometers. So that's 3 hours. Okay, now we connect this with the origin, and that will be our distance time graph. Okay, now our second part is to find the speed. I know we're given the speed here. I'm just trying to show you how to find the speed from a distance time graph. So this point here is 0, 0. This point here is 2, 3, and 60. Now remember, the gradient formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So let's say that's x1 and that's y2, and y1, and that's x2 and that's y2. So y2 is 0, that's 60, 0 divided by 2 and 3. Negatives cancel out, and so our final answer would be 60 times 3 and 2, which would be 90 kilometers per hour. Because our units for distance is kilometers, and our units for time is in hours.